Hi guys, in today's video we'll be taking a look at GitHub. GitHub is a free website which allows you to store all of your code online so that you don't lose access to it. GitHub is completely free now for both private and public repositories, and we'll look at how you can create one and upload your code today. So let's have a Before we begin, I just want to remind you that I'm doing a new C# video every day. So if you don't want to miss those, be sure to subscribe. So the first thing you're going to need is a GitHub account. So if you go to github.com and fill out this form, you'll be able to create a free account. And actually fairly recently, GitHub made some of the features that were only available to paid members available to all of the free members as well. So once you've signed up for GitHub, you want to sign in. And you'll come to your sort of repositories home screen. So for today's video, what you're going to need to do is create a new repository. And we'll call this one, I'm just going to call this one C# course. And it says C# course is available. You can call this whatever you want. I'm not going to give it a description. You have the choice to make it either public or private. So I typically always use private, and you used to have to pay for private, but actually you can have as many free private repositories as you want now. However, for this particular one, I'm going to be uploading all of the source code from all of the previous and future projects that I do on my YouTube channel. So I'm going to set this one to public. And what this essentially means is a public repository can be seen by anyone on the internet, and they can copy the code from there. They can do what's called a fork, which is they can sort of copy it into their GitHub and start working on the code themselves. A private one, people can't even see the name of it on your GitHub page. It's completely private to you. It's your code, and unless you add some users to it, you'll be the only one that can actually see it. But for today, I'm just going to create a public one. I'd suggest always using private unless you want other people to see your code that you upload. And then you just click create repository. And once you've created the repository, you'll then see you've got a sort of blank, empty repository here with no code in it. You'll see you've got your username and then / repository name, and you'll see that's the same in the URL as well. So it's quite easy to find and share these with people if you are making a public one. So the next thing we need to do is look at how we could check some code into that repository. So GitHub have a desktop app, which you can get at desktop.github.com. This works on Windows and Mac. It's probably the easiest path to learning about how to use GitHub. A lot of people use Git on the command line because GitHub essentially implements a technology called Git, which is a way to version control and store code on remote servers. The GitHub Desktop client allows you to do most things that you'd be able to do on the command line, but with a user interface, which is really good if you're just getting started. Once you've downloaded and installed this, if we go ahead and launch it, it looks something like this. So you can see here, here's a project that I'm currently working on. You've got this drop down here, which shows you all of your local repositories. When you first open this, obviously you won't have a project loaded up, and this will be completely empty. And what we want to do is we want to pull it down the repository we just created. So if you go to File, Clone Repository, this is going to pull up your github.com repositories. And if we look for C# course, so that's the one I just created earlier, and we'll just click that one and click Clone. And before we click Clone, actually, you can choose where on your hard drive that you want this to go. By default, GitHub creates a folder called GitHub in your Documents folder. This usually works fine for me. And then you click Clone. What that will do is it will download any code that was in the repository. Obviously, we didn't add any code to our repository. This is the first time we've looked at it. And you can see here that it's an unborn head, and it has no changes to files. So now, if we go into our, let's just use this one. Go into our Documents folder. Crikey. And if we go into GitHub, you see here we have our C# course. It's created this folder for us, which has nothing in it. So let's just create a file what you might find is you'll create a project and put that in here, and we'll just say initial file .txt, and we'll just quickly populate that with a hello world. And now if we go back into GitHub Desktop, you'll see it's immediately picked up that one file has changed. It's got this little plus icon to tell you that actually that's a new file rather than one that's just been updated. And now we can do our first commit. So a commit is essentially a submission of all of the changes since you last pulled down the repository. So it's usually helpful to put some information about what's changed. So we'll just put in here that we added our first file. And now you can click commit. And once your commit's finished, obviously that was very quick, but sometimes larger ones can take a little while longer. You can then click publish. And once the publish completes, that's then submitted and it will be available via the GitHub website. So if we just refresh our repository here, you can see we've got our initial file and then we've got the comment that we added for our commit. So if we look in here, you can see we've got hello world, just as we had on the desktop. And now what we should do is go in and make a change. So if we go in here and we rename this and we take that space out and maybe we add a smiley face on the end here. Now if we go back into GitHub Desktop, you'll see that the old file name has disappeared. So it's removed that file and we're now adding this new file with the correct name. And then we'll just add a comment here where we say we refactored the file name and we'll commit that one and push to origin. Notice how it says push to origin rather than publish. That's because we've already published our initial version and we're now pushing the changes to that version up to GitHub. So if we go back into GitHub, refresh here, you can see our file name's changed, our comments changed. And what you can now see is that we've got 2 commits. So one thing that GitHub does when you upload a new commit is it keeps track of all of the changes. So you can actually go back in time as well. So let's have a look at commits. You can see here the comment for the commit that you did, who did the commit. So you might be working on a project with multiple people. So you'll be able to see who actually did the commits and when, and then the time. And then what we can do is we can click on this one here, which is the commit ID, and we can look at what changed in that commit as well. One really handy feature is if we go back and we go to our first commit, and we have a look at that one, you can actually browse the files as they were in that commit. So you can see here, our initial file still has the space because we've kind of rewound the clock and we've gone back to that very first commit. So what you might find is when you're working on a project that you make a bunch of changes to different files and you commit those and then you realize, oh, actually, I've added a bug somewhere. What did I change yesterday, for example? And then you can come in here and you can look at yesterday's commit. You can see which file, what the files looked like but the day before, for example, and then you can use that to try and diagnose what's gone wrong. And equally, and even more importantly, when you're working with other developers, you can see what files they changed yesterday, and it can help you, well, essentially it can help you blame other people for problems, or it can help you diagnose problems much quicker. So that's the basics of GitHub using the GitHub Desktop client. I would recommend that for all of your projects that you just create a repository on GitHub, set it to private, and then use that to keep all of your code safe because it's all in the cloud. It's all going to be there forever, most probably, and it's absolutely free. So there's no reason not to. Hi, I hope you found that video useful. If you have any comments or feedback, then please leave me a comment below. I'm currently doing new videos every single day. So if you'd like to be notified about those, then hit that subscribe button. And I will see you in the next one.